Retrenchments in Singapore climbed to their highest level in more than 5 years in the second quarter of this year. Now, according to the Manpower Ministry's latest report, the labour market continued to grow, with total employment extending its streak of quarterly gains. Eldrina Tirunagran tells us more.
Outward-oriented sectors like infocoms and manufacturing saw higher retrenchments in the second quarter of 2026. Preliminary figures show 4,500 workers were laid off, up from 3,830 in the preceding quarter. But the figure remained well below retrenchment levels, typically seen during economic downturns like the global financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. MOM says the increase was driven mainly by business reorganization and restructuring.
Some of these reflect the fact that the current situation is moving at a very rapid pace. AI developments are very fast. So some jobs are increasingly demanded, others are becoming irrelevant.
Analysts say AI-assisted coding, for instance, is reshaping hiring needs and leaving a larger pool of software developers and product managers competing for jobs.
While that continues to be demand for these skill sets, particularly among the smaller organizations in Singapore, or those industries where they are at the earlier stages of digital maturity, it currently remains unclear whether that demand will fully absorb this surplus in the near term.
Even so, total employment grew by 10,700 in the second quarter, marking the 19th consecutive quarter of growth. Growth in resident employment was concentrated in essential and public services. MOM says labour demand remains resilient, with hiring expectations improving.
For construction industries, we see that with certain investments in technology automation, that is creating new potential opportunities for Singaporeans. Beyond construction industry, we see positive demand in manufacturing, no surprises in AI data, cybersecurity. In financial services industries, roles relating to risk fraud will continue to be an area of growth.
Then at the same time, due to the Middle East uncertainties, I think Singapore continues to be a bit of a safe haven, providing some certainty for companies to invest in and to grow their businesses in, due to the certain nature of this region as well as Singapore. So it will also help to bring about some potential job growth.
NTUC Assistant Secretary General Yeo Wan Ling says that while the overall picture remains positive, there may be workers affected by restructuring. She adds that the labour movement will support workers through transitions to ensure they stay confident about the future.
And for more analysis on the numbers, we're joined by Dr. Faizal Yahya, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the NUS Institute of Policy Studies. Dr. Faizal, employment is up, unemployment is stable, but then retrenchments have risen. So what's your read of the Q2 labour market report?
I think probably it's due to a skills mismatch. There are certain skill sets that are in areas where there are redundant or legacy issues as AI restructuring drives ahead. There are also, for example, as what the other sources mentioned, the impact on the global community due to the tariffs, for example, due to the global supply chain shocks, energy shocks. So I think essentially what you mentioned is outward facing. Singapore is actually vulnerable to all these. What is interesting is that we have a highly qualified labor force. I mean, they are at a tertiary level, I think it's more than 60%. But essentially, employers are looking at specific skill sets as they restructure going forward, especially in the AI landscape. So when the supply line actually slows down, so the competition heats up as to the skill sets that are required as company goes through this restructuring process.
Yeah. Well, now, in your view, is enough being done to tackle the skills mismatch problem? And are there other deeper structural issues in the labour market at this point?
So I think essentially, for example, Skills Future, has actually rolled out certain schemes and grants. Even for mature workers like me, they are actually incentives in the, for example, the professional conversion programs, the skills level up program. They actually provide opportunities for mid-career switches and for you to actually learn new skill sets as you are trying to port yourself into a different sector, or you're trying to gather new skills in terms of the changes in your own job scope as you go forward. Perhaps all these things are actually not new. For example, if you look at the Singapore Economic Resilience Task Force, CERT, for example, they mentioned that one of the pillars is on innovation and technology that we actually have to leverage on. Of course, Singapore is no stranger to tech. We want to be an innovative economy, and especially an AI kind of hub. So all these things that you take into account, you do need to actually adapt in terms of the structural changes that's actually happening right now.
Yeah, and speaking of those changes, the retrenchments in sectors, in particular, the infocom sector and the manufacturing sectors were harder hit in this case. And that was attributed mainly to business restructuring. So what kind of restructuring are we likely seeing here? Is this temporary, or can we expect further deterioration?
Well, as mentioned, the AI phenomena is actually driving things forward. Things, for example, the cloud infrastructure. Companies, for example, are looking at how to embed AI into their business workflows. They are trying to upskill their workers to gain a competitive edge against other companies. So this will not be a temporary phenomena. This is a stay here kind of impact and trend. I mean, if I may say so, for example, the retrenchments that happen at GovTech, for example, gives you an idea that companies are looking more to focus on their core tech strengths. And for example, when you change your business model, for example, in the case of GovTech, when you change towards a in-house innovation kind of mode that would look at continuous upgrading and adapting their services against the kind of offshore service delivery model that they had previously, it caused a certain amount of disruptions to GovTech itself. So even the public sector, for example, goes through such a painful kind of process, and the corporate sector is no exception to this.
Now, manufacturing employment actually grew in the second quarter, and that's driven partly by non-residents. But the sector also saw more retrenchment. So how do we reconcile what seems like a contradiction here?
Yeah, I think it's in terms of the sectoral and type of job scopes that we are talking about, for example. I mean, for resident workers, you hardly find them in the operational domain on site or in the field. You hardly would find them, for example, in manufacturing on online production sort of floor, actually looking at the kind of work that, for example, work permit foreign workers actually do. So in a sense, the resident workers are more into the PMET kind of mold. They actually look at the more of the higher supervisory roles. So when the production lines actually changes due to things, for example, the R word again, supply chain resilience, supply chain shocks. We've had terms, for example, in the supply chain domain after COVID that has kicked into, for example, just in time has been replaced to just in case. So companies are looking to ensure near shore and friend shore their particular sources and to meet their demand. So all these things actually impact and affect the supply chain realignment that we find ourselves in. And with the current conflicts, in the Middle East and Ukraine, for example, these add to the kind of volatility in the supply chain, and companies make readjustments, and this would impact on our manufacturing sector.
Dr. Faizal, thank you so much for your insights. That was Dr. Faizal Yahya, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the NUS Institute of Policy Studies.